Good morning, everyone. My name is Orsalia Andreou. I'm from Erste Group Bank, located in Vienna, Austria, a data scientist with an academic background in applied mathematics. And sorry for the small delay, we had a technical issue with the microphone. But the topic for today will be how to foster trust in AI-driven solutions, our experiences and lessons learned from the projects that we worked on. And the key 2 points, if you can remember during and after this session, what I would like you to take with you is the importance of fostering this trust through our entire model life cycle, not think about it only at the end when we are deploying our solutions to the users, and the importance of engaging a diverse set of stakeholders through this process to make sure that what we build is really trustworthy AI. And since I forgot to get the click also, thank you. Let's... We tested it in the morning, I promise. It was working. Yeah? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, let's first take a step back and see where we are, right? Because we are witnessing this rapid AI development, and let's be honest, it's happening in such a fast pace that it's hard to follow, even for professionals in data science. And with that being hard to follow, there comes sometimes this hard time to adapt to this change, right? Because now I'm confused because of the technical problems, but from statistical models and attention to ChatGPT, all these technological advancements in the past years, we all agree that are here to shape not only finance, the entire set of industries. But there are many reasons that at the moment most use cases don't move to production, and what I would like to highlight is one of these is, first of all, we are dealing with a lot of inheritance systems that are hard to implement Gen AI and general AI solutions, but there is also a lack of trust in the stakeholders. And what to keep in mind here is that these stakeholders, they hear about AI all the time, but in reality, most of them are not techies. They don't really understand how things are working. And when we don't understand this, okay, as human beings, we tend to fear, right? We tend to fear that these new products will take our jobs. We are afraid to verify the outcomes of machine learning solutions. What we often hear about, put the person in the loop, but how often do we ask this person if they are confident enough in what we are asking them to verify? And fear brings resistance to this change because they don't want to change always the way they are working. They don't believe, because they don't understand, that what you are proposing is something that can benefit the way they are working. It can enable them. And the question is, what can we do? And there are concrete things within our reach that we can do to change these perspectives and turn this resistance into engagement. But before we do that, let's define trust for today. Trust is a very general term, and we can agree that there are both technical and non-technical aspects to tackle when we want to foster trust, but the focus will be in the rather technical and within the reach things that you can implement into your projects already tomorrow. And we will focus on trust in terms of data and features, so understanding the information that we are putting into our algorithms and trusting that they are of certain quality. We will say that we trust a model when it performs in a good enough way for us to use it further on. We will trust it when it's reliable. We don't want surprises, right? You don't want something in production the one day giving the right things and the second completely random that you cannot explain. Which takes me to the fourth part, the explainability and interpretability of models. Here, of course, there are some use cases. If we look into anti-money laundering, performance and reliability is much more important. As long as you are able to capture illegal behavior, you are happy even if you don't understand fully how the model is working. But in other business areas like risk assessment, there you really want to understand why a certain model is indicating problematic behavior in for the clients. But I promise that we will see hands-on things in the entire model life cycle, and that trust is something we build in the entire model life cycle. So we will start by looking into this model life cycle that begins really when we are building the business case for which we want to apply an AI solution or a machine learning model on top. And what happens usually in this case is that we are having some ambition, we are having a vision, we are having a problem that we want to tackle, and we reach out to see how we can solve this problem with AI, how we can enable a certain process to work better with AI. And we define some success criteria. But what we don't often do yet is we don't ask who are our stakeholders, who is going to interact with this model. And it's really important to define your stakeholders in this step, because these stakeholders have a different level of expectation of what it takes for them to trust your model. The stakeholders could be the business owner who comes to you and asks for this model, but it could be also the end user, it could be your IT colleagues that are going to implement it into production, it could be audit, validation, any sort of different aspect, if I'm talking now specifically to the finance use cases. And all of these people have different backgrounds, and they want to do something different with your model. They will interact in different ways, and therefore what it takes for them to trust it and to be comfortable with it, it's different. And it's important to recognize it from the very beginning. And another reason why it is important to recognize it is because this will set the frame on what to choose later on when you are deciding how to build this solution. Yeah, because there is so much technology right now for things that you could do that you need somehow to limit yourself and decide which are these solutions that will truly benefit you for your use case. The second part is the data. Here we're collecting, we are analyzing, we are evaluating. Why are stakeholders important? What can you do here? Verify the information, yeah? Don't just build features that you are feeding into a model. Check if these things are like making sense for the people that were doing this job manually for several decades. Are they how they were expecting? It's simple steps, but sometimes we don't do them, and then you end up bringing them a model after 6 months or what, and they have no idea what you're talking about. Which takes us to the features, the feature engineering and selection. And here is an excellent opportunity to especially engage users of the model. And why is that? Because we will define 3 different types of features. Let's take an example. I'm building a model and I want to create a pricing tool for real estate to support the mortgage business, yeah? And here this tool will need to be validated from the people in the branch, so they will be needing to explain why a certain pricing took place to the customer. And to do that, they will need to understand what you are putting into the model. So if I'm starting with the features with a semantic meaning, in our example, this would be simple things like how big is your house, how many rooms does it have. These are things that we can all understand as humans. Then we have the features that are derived, and they are still maintaining a semantic meaning, something that the human can attach to. These could be your typical transformations, what we need to perform when we are feeding an information to a model. For example, a standardization technique that has to do purely with how the algorithm will operate in a different way. Or maybe what we often do for those algorithms that cannot process categorical information or text information is transforming to numeric values. These things you can still, like, it's a one-to-one relation, you can still have a natural meaning to your input, model input, but it's not the original value. And then we go to the feature transformations that don't have a direct semantic meaning. Here, for the ones that are working in data science, like we are talking about interaction terms, suddenly you figure out that multiplying the square footage of the house with the number of rooms is for some reason predictable, but how can you conceive as a human such a multiplication? You still want to use it maybe on your model, or what I would propose is ask your stakeholders and users, hey, I see this is very predictable. Are you okay with us using it? And after we have built our features and we have agreed on the optimal set, also with the experts, we are moving into our model discovery phase. This is when we do the cool stuff. And here in this phase, we will be developing the model, we will assessing it, fine-tuning it, and the proposal is include them in this stage too, because you can do so many things. And here I will share a story with you. We built a very fancy neural network. No one could understand it and wanted to use it. So then we had to throw to the trash 3 weeks of work and go back to things that people could better grasp. We could have saved this time. It was really predictable, but it was not working for them. During your model discovery, I would like first to say about this myth or this old truth that you need to have a trade-off between explainability and performance. This in reality starts to not be true anymore, because research is evolving so fast. I talked about this at the beginning, that scientists are developing inherently explainable architectures. So even if we are talking about more advanced neural network stuff, there are architectures there. We can, if you are interested, talk about it also afterwards, that can provide you this full explainability with the linear components. So look into the research, what is going on, and question the status quo sometimes, because things are moving so fast that when you are in this project phase, it's hard to miss and think you are really limited. In reality, you are not. But more concretely, for the how best practices on the model building itself, here I will go a bit fast because these are general stuff, but these are general stuff that they are often missed due to lack of time, and they are in the end leading to a lack of trust and explainability in your machine learning models. First of all, model generalization. Be aware of overfitting or underfitting your models. This will only lead in misleading results that will make no sense. Try to keep in mind validation techniques. Check how is the model performing in out of sample data, out of time data, because when you will deploy it into production, the time horizon will not be consistent with what you developed on. Then model complexity. It's very nice to look into all of these complex things, but in reality, you don't always need it. There is a huge, huge need for traditional machine learning techniques, traditional being from regressions to extreme gradient boosting, random forests, neural networks with linear components. You can do many things in more traditional machine learning that can still prove to be very beneficial for your use case, and not everything can be solved with Gen AI, even though this is all we are hearing about these days. So my proposal, be aware, you don't always need complex models to solve your issues. And when you don't go for the complex solution. It will only create more work for everyone without meaning. Then estimation uncertainty. The machine learning model results are also random variables in the end, so we should be aware of these variances. Work also with confidence intervals in our predictions, something that is missing often, especially for people that are working with random forest XGBoost. At least I don't see, but if you are doing it already, this is great. Feature interactions, something very important. So in case we have, we know that independence implies the Pearson correlation coefficient to be 0, but if two features have this correlation 0, it doesn't mean that they are independent, and these hidden interactions that you may not have discovered because they are unlinear or whichever reason, will also affect the explainability of the model results. We actually had this case with the pricing model. When we were reviewing what was going on with the features with the experts, they saw something that they thought it was a bit counterintuitive, and when we looked deeper into it, it was because we hadn't fully discovered the interactions between two variables that were creating then false effects on the global model level. And finally, my absolute favorite, which is expected, according to research, to reach the plateau of productivity in the next 2 to 5 years, causal discovery and causal AI. So machine learning models, if you are working with them, it's very popular these days to show these sharp values. They don't show causal effects unless you have worked with causal discovery during your feature selection process. Yeah, this is a myth. If someone tells you, because the sharp value is like this, your model is behaving like this, unless they did the work before, it's not true. And so we see a huge progress at the moment also in research, but happens as well with open source Python packages already in ways to discover these causalities and have models where the inputs are truly revealing what is causing the output. Okay. Global model behavior is also another thing that you can enhance. Feature importance, yeah, check it with the experts. I already talked about this. I'm not going to go into detail. Most models provide this out of the box, but there are techniques to do it also model agnostic. Feature interactions, what is the underlying structure in your model's decisions? Here there are many things that you can do. There are really many things that you can do, yeah. I put here some general ones to get you started with, but as long as you dig deeper in each of these things, you will find more things you can do. So partial dependence plots, M-plots, accumulated local effects plots, sharp hierarchical clustering, some things to explore feature interactions on global model level. Sensitivity analysis, here we are going back to the reliability because trust is through the entire life cycle. And what you can do here, change one feature at a time approach where you are keeping everything stable and inserting some noise to see what happens to your model results. One feature at a time. Variance-based methods, bivariate analysis between input and output. These are all things that can get you started with how stable and robust your model outputs are. And in the end, build trust, because when you are then going to your stakeholders and you say, hey, what's your concern? You think that this model will be unstable. Where I checked this and this and this. Are you feeling better now? They will feel better, yes, because you looked into it. And finally, fairness and bias. We are so afraid of bias because our data are biased and we want to build a better world for the future. So training data are not always reflecting this future that you have in mind. Well, what I always say is that as long as you know of it, you can act upon it. So check the model results here, representativeness analysis, model performance analysis against different segments, really just to scratch the surface about how to go about bias and fairness on how the model is behaving. And you don't always have the capacity to deal with this in an algorithmic way, especially if we are looking into segments that are underrepresented in your data. Perhaps you don't have enough data points to deal with it. It's okay, just remove it from the application, but don't try to predict things that your model was never able to learn for. And I know I said some bad things about SHAP and Lime, but to be like, to have like a full understanding of the topic of global and local model results, they are important. Yeah, they are important. Of course, these tools are useful, but it's important to know what is the meaning in the plots that you see. So when to use each of them. So here we could say that SHAP is good for both local and global explanations. In Lime we are working only with local things. For the non-techies, this means that a global explanation is when I'm trying to understand the model in total, like how it works. The local explanation is when I'm doing a scoring for a specific client, for a specific house, and I'm trying to see which were the predictors that drove this decision for this specific case. SHAP can work with a wide variety of visualizations. The plots are really nice. They are suitable for different model types because they are model agnostic. What we saw is there are some performance issues with some of the algorithms, but in general they are more stable than Lime. Lime on itself is, like in our experience, suitable for more simple things, more simple model architectures. It is also model agnostic, but can display some instability in the results because under the hood is doing a random sampling during the perturbation. Okay. After we discovered the model and we did all of these things, and hopefully we are now at the point of deployment because we explained to our stakeholders and we made them trust the model results. They find the importance in the output and they see a benefit for their business. We are deploying. And what can happen here, especially if you are working with inheritance systems like us, is that what you imagined sometimes that would work in deployment will not work, yeah? Because maybe they told you they can deploy advanced analytics, but it's not true. And here at this point, I would say this is why I would connect the business case with the deployment and identifying the stakeholders, because putting the IT into the loop from the very beginning and defining what are the things that they can truly implement will save you a lot of time and effort in probably needing to build something new if they never deployed a machine learning model before. And finally, model monitoring. This is also essential to have trust in what you have built and now rolled out into production is actually working as expected. There are 3 levels that we are doing it in the team. First of all, there is the technical monitoring, where we are just assessing that the entire pipeline is following the standards of the time of deployment. Then we have the model monitoring, which is assessing the model performance in terms of the do I see any change in the application portfolio in comparison with my development portfolio? Are there any shifts in the features that I need to take care of because maybe they will create bias in the results? And finally, we have the business monitoring, where we are monitoring the KPIs from business. So what is for them an acceptable level of performance? are we fulfilling their needs? If we are talking about pricing, properties for mortgages, what is the percentage of the process that we can automate? If we promise them 60% and currently has dropped to 20, this is a reason to look again into our model. So all of these are like what I was mentioning, ways that you can tackle trust and foster trust throughout the entire model life cycle. Don't think about it only when you are at deployment or when you are already into production and you give this user the model and say, now take it. You can use it. They will not want to use it unless it's like, I don't know, something really obvious. Yeah, so to close this presentation, this is my dream for the future, that AI will be supporting us and we will not need to be afraid anymore, and we can foster this trust and this confidence into the products that we are building already from the data science perspective. It's not something that you need your management to push for. It's things very concrete that everyday person working in data science projects can do to help their colleagues have this trust. And with this, I will close this presentation for today. And in case you have any questions, I would be happy to respond either here or if anything you know, did it for you and you want more details, just come and find me. I would be happy to share references. So any questions?
Thank you for the presentation. It was great to hear. I have a question regarding, you mentioned that you had a problem regarding the feature engineering, that it took 3 weeks for you to develop the model, then you had a problem to explain the variables. Maybe I misheard that. Did you use some kind of neural network, and then it was like intermediate variables, and that's the first question. And the second, if you can elaborate more on this connection between the IT and the business case or deployment. Is it like capacity of software engineers, or their familiarity with machine learning, or just some other thing? Thanks.
Thank you for your question. So the first point is, yeah, during the model discovery, we are trying many things because usually we are building new stuff. And when you are building new stuff, you don't have a benchmark about how good performance you can achieve. So what happens is that we could start from a very simple model to see what a traditional machine learning would do, but we will also test this more advanced one that will help us understand, okay, where do we stand in terms of our KPIs and what is that will bring value to this use case. So in that case, we did have a neural network, and it was not even about the in-between interactions. It was really them hearing neural network and not wanting to cope with it.
So basically that was the fear that you mentioned.
Yeah. They didn't want to go that direction, and actually we said okay because there was no other neural network deployed yet in the bank, so we were also afraid of the deployment and that perhaps the infrastructure is not ready, which takes me to your second question. Why is it important? Because for us this transition started around 4 years ago, where we wanted to start deploying more advanced stuff, and we have a lot of legacy systems. Let's be honest, the bank is around for many years, and things are not always modernized as fast as the advancements are happening in AI. Yeah, the people didn't have the understanding of what it takes, so we had this very specific situation. There was at some point the expectation that for them deployment meant that they could translate the whole thing in SQL and deploy it in SQL. That could not work. But it's also hardware. So it's both knowledge and hardware. Sometimes the things are not there yet.
Thank you.
You can take mine.
It's okay.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. So if you have any questions, you can ask Orsalia afterwards.
Thank you, everyone.
Testing, testing. Thank you. Okay, so next we have Nathan Coyle, Senior Peace Tech Advisor at the Austrian Center for Peace. Nathan will be presenting open data for everybody, social action, peace tech, and making open data outreach more open for communities. In this session, Nathan will explore the transformative potential of open data as a tool for social good, empowering activists, third sector organizations, and peace-building initiatives. He will discuss systemic changes within government institutions that hinder open data accessibility and offer strategies for making open data more inclusive and impactful. Please welcome Nathan to the stage.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm Nathan. It seems to be everyone's from Austria today, and I can't get away from them. But it's really nice to be here in Belgrade. I've wanted to come here for a very long time. I'm a Wolverhampton Wanderers supporter, which no one would make any nonsense to. There used to be a player called Nenad Milias, who was the best player at Wolves. So I'm going to talk about peace tech today and how it intersects with open data and AI. Have you ever heard of peace tech? Just put a hand up. No one's ever heard of peace tech. That is fantastic. That means my workshop is actual. I've lost my little thing. Sorry, I need to, thank you, vielen Dank. Right, so as a lovely young lady said, I'm Nathan Coyle, and I wear two hats in Austria. So I lead on peace tech for the Austrian Centre for Peace, and I also lead on peace tech for the Austrian Institute of Technology, and that's the biggest research institution in the country. I wear other different hats within the EU. I sit on the EIB Cyber Academic Board for the European Union, and I also sit on something called the EU Peace Tech Cluster, which is a bunch of nation states that get together, and they talk about peace technology and how we can use it for cyber and then not do anything, as what the EU usually does. So, obviously none of you have ever heard about peace tech, so I'm going to give you a little bit of a crash course. And before I go into this little course, when I say the word peace tech, right, I come from the civic technology world, which I think actually means something. But then you have all these buzzwords like smart cities, and it genuinely is a smart buzzword, smart city. So when you hear the word peace tech, do you think that's a buzzword? Yes, no? You can interact with me, I'm not a teacher. Yeah? No? God, everyone's hungover, I think. Let's discuss if it is a buzzword a bit later on. So, but what does it actually mean? And now this is a working definition. The problem that we have with peace technology is that everyone's got a different definition. And again, I just mentioned smart cities, and there is no definition to what a smart city is. It's different in different places of the world, in different cities. With peace technology, it's pretty similar. So different countries will have their own definition to what peace technology is. And that depends what their government is working with. So most of the time, it's really corporate, yeah? And the problem with peace tech is it can't be corporate because peace builders are not technically minded. They are normal people. They have little to no digital skills, and they can't have something that's pushed on them again, like, again, smart cities. But this is kind of the working definition. So use of technology to address conflicts, reduce violence, and promote peace and social cohesion. Sounds lovely, doesn't it? So we're going to end the wars of the world. We're going to have peace everywhere thanks to peace technology. Now, is it a buzzword? Right, so the best way to explain something that is really technical is just talk about how it is deployed. So I'm going to go through all the different ways of how it's deployed and look at a live example of what peace tech looks like in the field. So communication and mediation, so social media, messaging apps, conferencing tools. There's another buzzword within peace technology now called tech diplomacy. And when I was first told about tech diplomacy, and they were telling me about it, right, so Nathan, what we're going to do with the EU, we're going to try and deploy more tech diplomacy within our missions and get our staff in our missions who can interact better with the community. And so what we want to do is use technology in order to bring across this mediation. I was like, so what is tech diplomacy? And then they're like, well, it's your job, isn't it, to tell me what tech diplomacy is? And I was like, well, what do you think tech diplomacy is? And so, well, you know, using like Zoom and Teams and Google, whatever. And I was like, well, why do you need a word for that? Like, why do we have to like complicate things even more? But unfortunately, I get paid to try and explain this stuff to people. This is a really good example, Shadi, and this was set up in 2007 within the Kenyan post-election riots. Now, they had something very similar in Kenya recently, and this came back out into the media, and people were using this as a means to document what was happening on the streets. But back then, it was a lot more sinister, it was a lot more violent, and loads of human rights abuses were happening across Nairobi and the rest of the country. And people needed a way to document that. And this came along, and then this turned into something quite bigger now. It's actually quite a big concern. It's not just used in peace building, and it's been used within the UN when the Gaza, Libya, and Syria crisis happened, or happening when they wanted participants to talk about what was happening to them in those communities. But they needed a way where they could be anonymous, but also verified, and this was used for that. Digital storytelling and empathy. So I'm working on a project for the Austrian government at the moment with the European Union called Skill Drill. And this is how we can use mixed reality and virtual reality to enhance mission awareness and mission training. So what happens when you go on mission? What you're going to encounter, and etc. So I think there's a lot of power in VR. And I don't want to come across like a bit of a cynic when it comes to digital. But so I know, again, I'm leading on a project for the Austrian government. But I've been on mission, right? I've been to many missions around the world. Like, I know what it's like to be in a conflict zone. I know what it's like to go to a border and then somebody asks for your papers. It's pretty scary, right? And it's not something you can train. So I'm a bit dubious, right, when we have this VR tool and then you're going around this fictional village and you have some like floating man hovering above you, like on Meta. It ain't the best. But I do think the power in VR, especially now, is building empathy. You can turn your phone into a VR headset. You can buy a piece of cardboard. You can make it yourself. It's cheap, right? And this is what I always talk to show people when I'm trying to build this empathy within virtual reality. So I'm British, and I come from a country that doesn't really have a lot of empathy. If you look at like our history, and if you look at what we did recently, if you look at the Brexit campaign that happened fairly recently in the past 5 years, it was an insidious place to live at that time. And there was no empathy towards other people coming into our country and access and all that kind of stuff. And it was horrible. And this is why I really see that VR is a way to build empathy, because it kind of shows people how people live. And this is a really good and harrowing. Oh, can you hear me better? Sorry. I also have allergies, so excuse me if I start coughing. Education and digital literacy. So, you know, how can we, it is what it says in the tin. EdTech, educational technology. How that can be used in peace building standards. So there's another project I'm leading on for the European Union called Augmenta. And this is how we can use AI for pedagogical reasons. So how we can enhance training for participants, and we can kind of identify what they're doing wrong, and if they're struggling in certain parts, if they have intellectual issues, and then we can use AI to kind of hammer that down too. Again, I'm pretty skeptical about AI, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But Minecraft is a great tool. This is actually used by the United Nations Refugee Agency, and they use it for mapping and coordination of services. So there's a scenario, you can go on there, and you get together with all the other people online, and then you set a task or agenda, and then you crack on. Now, they're doing actually a lot in the kind of peace building sphere now. I know the guy at Microsoft who heads up peace building, and he's a really good guy. And they're really interested now in how they can utilize the technology sector to work more with peace building. And there's money, and they're bringing money out, and you should look into that if you're going for those kind of funds. Cybersecurity and digital protection. So this is where the money is with the EU, right? And if you look at, have you ever heard of Horizon Europe, which is a big call that comes out for the European Union? Anyone can go for that money, including partners in Serbia as well. A lot of that now is looking at secure data spaces, how missions can protect their systems, and data training. This is where the EU now is starting to put their money into, and all that. But when I try to explain what that looks like in practice, I give people something a bit more simple. And this is just a digital first aid kit. And if people are being tracked online or they've lost their data, it's something that's like a no BS approach. Data analysts and early warning systems. So there are loads of these at the moment. This seems to be like the buzzword when it comes to peace tech, but there is a lot of value in it, because we're working on a project in South Sudan, and in South Sudan a lot of conflict comes from really simple things like drought or cattle going missing. And using this kind of stuff, it's actually really easy to kind of map that, and if cattle goes missing, we can replace the cattle, and that would de-escalate the violence and all that kind of stuff. So the European Union doesn't have one, but the African Union has two, and there are lots of different things happening now. There's a really cool project coming out called Peace Eye in Austria, and one of the things that we're doing with that is we're trying to make it more human-centric, and so co-designing it with people. So we're going to go to Juba in South Sudan, and we're going to hold a workshop and hold like a bit of a hackathon and get those people to design this tool with us. Strata is the biggest one out there, and it's horrible to use. The data is fantastic, but it's horrible to use. And again, me coming from civic tech, the idea of civic hacking, like something ain't got to look pretty for it to work. And what I used to do is take data and turn it into tools that actually make sense to people. This is a good idea to take the data and then make it look nice because this is abhorrent. AI models, tech diplomacy, I just talked about it I won't go into it again, but I'm working, I can't talk too much about it, but I'm working in Sudan at the moment, obviously with the conflict, and we're looking about how we can use AI models to aggregate all the data and evidence from workshops and put together peace plans. You would have all seen this. Volodymyr Zelensky, when the conflict happened in the Ukraine and Russia, this video came out and it went across all the channels, and then obviously it was debunked. But I want to show this because in Ukraine, it's quite, Western, it's quite digitally savvy. If this happened in a place like South Sudan, it would be terrible, absolutely terrible. And there's a thing in South Sudan, and some cultures as well, about photography. And, if they see that, they will believe it. And so this here, in this instance, was, okay, debunked, fine. But, again, in other countries, this would have had incredible amounts of damage. And it's scary how damaging that would have been. So is peace tech a buzzword? I do think it is a buzzword. And again, me coming from a background where I used to work with governments, and making open data more human-centric, and how we can make policy more human-centric. So what governments used to do is they would listen to massive agencies. There's a big one in the UK that is government-backed, and they would go around to all the different cities in the country, and then they would go, right, smart cities, open data, blah, 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 we need to make it this way. But they would design it in a really corporate way. And then what would happen is the idea of open data, they would kind of take what they said, and then they would not really understand what they're talking about, and then kind of push out their own version of what they think open data is. And then communities, where it's amazing the power of open data for communities. If you're third sector, you can use it for funding, capacity building, loads of different stuff, right? But they didn't understand it. And they were like, well, this is all like nonsense, isn't it? Again, it's more buzzwords. And that's what we don't want to do with peace technology, because it needs to be a narrative that's made with peace builders, third sector, normal people, activists, like not suits. We want to keep them away from it. Actual people who can have a say in how it's going to be used. So the biggest power for anything digital is capacity, especially in the third sector or peace building, right? And if you're going to push something out there that isn't accessible, then what's the point, right? Everyone's just taking a wage. You're sitting in the same rooms, talking about the same things, but nothing's actually getting done, right? And that's what we tried not to do with this. We are doing a paper at the AIT at the moment on tech diplomacy and AI. If you are anyway academic or interested in that kind of stuff, please do take a photo of that and fill out the survey. We can include you in that paper. I'll leave the little thing in the corner. So open data, again, it needs to be more about this building communities, getting away from the corporateness, which is a bit of a nightmare for me personally, because again, when you sit on various like EU boards and you're looking around the room, it's just mostly like old white dudes, again, talking about the same things. And there's no one from communities, there's no one representing the third sector. It's just diplomats talking about that kind of stuff. And that's what we want to kind of get away from. And when it comes to training AI, as you know more than me, I'm not a data scientist, but the sources that we get are actually really narrow. And so people from communities are really overlooked, and it's something that it needs to be really prevalently looked at. I don't really people are starting to wake up to the idea of bias, again, which I'll talk about in a minute. But no one's really taking it serious at government level. There seems to be a want from the third sector, people like you guys, who are interested in making tech more human-centric, but there really hasn't been that buy-in yet from government, and this is where like business needs to take more of a lead and kind of push them, because they listen to business, governments do, unfortunately sometimes. So data bias, data is racist, data is sexist, it's all the things that reflect society, and unfortunately that's not going to change. Unless society changes, that's not going to change. So it's something we've got to live with, and something we need to be really prevalently aware of. Like I'd love to say, yeah, so yeah, you know, as us as a society grows, then data will grow with us. It ain't going to change. Like, there's no fix to it. I know it's a bit pessimistic, but there we go. Why it matters for peace building. So the data that we train AI models on, it needs to be human. It needs to have that human reflection. And without that, it won't work. And it will be something that would just kind of not be used. And then again, what's the point? What's the point of it? Again, it's really skewed as well when it comes to AI. So if you look at Europe, for example, here there's a lot of data, there's a lot of digital things going on, and you know, there's a lot of data we can train different models on. If you look at Africa and Asia, not so much, right? And so if we're designing you know, new AI models for wherever, and those communities aren't represented, then again, it's pointless, and it's biased already, because all the data that we're using is from, you know, states like here and Austria and UK, whatever, and then that's not intrinsic to different parts of the world. And so, you know, accessibility, and I won't go into all this now because I'm running out of time. So I wrote a book recently called Open Data for Everybody. It's on Routledge at the moment. And this was looking at how, again, where I was talking about how governments need to make open data more human-centric, and I work with governments all over the world, and I put it into like a book. And I'm not going to bang on about it because I'm not here to sell my book. But it might be worth me sharing some of the reflections from the different groups. So third sector, they struggled to grasp the idea of open data. And the fix was simple. It was just language, only language. And like, you know, once you told them about, yeah, you know, you can use this open data for your funding or whatever and blah, 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 they was interested. And one of the things that really grasped people was after COVID-19, and I don't know if it was similar here, but in the UK, for example, loads of charities went out of business because they couldn't find money. Their core funding was going, and they wasn't resilient, where open data is actually a really powerful tool for community resilience. And that's what needs to be drummed into people's heads, especially in the third sector. So government workers, these were the bane of my life, working with ministers and whatever. And so, you know, they would go into, like I was saying before, these policy people would go in and say, hey, you need to do this. You need to talk about like social cohesion and whatever. And then they would take that and then they'd go, yeah, okay. And then they'd form policy on their own interpretation of what they think they heard, and then it caused so much damage. But the problem is with people in government, they're stubborn and they work in silos. So they wouldn't admit like, okay, I actually don't really understand this, and ask questions. So then they'd spend loads and loads of money to like push this out there, and then people like me would have to go in and fix it. So I was really happy about it because I had a job, but it was really bad for the actual movement of social action and using digital and open data. So some more kind of human-centric outreach recommendations that's in the book is, you know, the open data image problem. That's similar to peace tech, and this is again how I'm coming into the peace tech world, like quite new, that we want to kind of change this image problem and turn it into something that is actually human-centric. The power of storytelling, it's really simple. Again, language is a really easy fix. how people explain stuff. Again, we're talking about capacity building, funding tenders, reports, campaigning, whatever. People that actual real people care about. And then a focus on the third sector of how outreach, using outreach as a model, and that kind of capacity building outreach narrative. Public value, we talked about community resilience. Again, that's really important. Disruptive innovation and open source. There's loads of free stuff out there that third sector can access, and they don't know about it. And talking to local actors, steering groups. Now, in the UK, we have a lot of these steering group kind of things where people come together and talk about local issues and policy, etc., etc. I used to work for the German government in my last job, and when I went there, their emphasis was on business and how business can improve the local sector, etc. And there was no one talking to local communities, and steering groups were a really weird alien concept for them, which I thought was really weird. And yeah, so we did some work very, very recently at the Austrian Forum for Peace with the Open Knowledge Foundation, who you may have heard of. They're also a partner in the Open Peace Tech Hub. And we got loads of people from the UN and different places from different agencies, and we asked them about, you know, what is the gaps from the data providers? Who are they missing? And so we did this hackathon with those guys and peace builders and activists, and then we put together this policy driver document, and this is on the Open Knowledge Foundation website at the moment. The link is there if you'd like to look at it. But some of the things that are very, 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 very quickly go into is, you know, what would these peace builders want from data providers, you know, to get them to use open data more? So there were 17. So one was gamification, playing with data, pulling it around, you know, how we can access it better. Expiration date, like, you know, data goes out of date, like your cheese does. And data bias questionnaire, so how was the data collected? What is the profile of that person? And how then the person who downloads the data can make a better decision about how they use the bias with it. And that's it. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for listening to me. If you want to come and talk to me, I'll be around all weekend. So yeah, have a lovely time, and thank you so much. Cheers.
Okay, so next we have Shrey Agarwal. I think I pronounced that fairly correctly. He's the Director of Responsible AI at Fractal. Shrey will be presenting 2025 Year of the AI Dilemma, Ethics, Regulations and Innovations. In this session, he will explore the challenges and opportunities posed by the rapid integration of AI into daily life. Drawing parallels to the Oppenheimer dilemma, he will highlight the profound responsibility that comes with the power of machine learning and AI. He will delve into critical topics such as fairness, accountability, privacy, and transparency, as well as issues like hallucination, monetization, and societal impact. Please welcome Shrey to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. So today we are going to talk on something very, very important, just not responsible AI, but we'll go deep into adaptive, responsible AI, adaptive government, cognitive experiences, and AI governance. So starting with this, so this is very normal. We have heard it and we have seen that how there are three major risks when you do not implement responsible AI. And I call it revenue risk, reputational risk, and regulatory risk. Regulatory risk and revenue risk can again be handled to a large extent, but reputational risk is something that once it occurs, it is completely gone for a toss. Somebody writes it on Twitter or Instagram and Facebook, there is no going back. right? And that is multiple times reputationally and regulatory risk combined together. Now, does it make a business sense to have a responsible AI system in place? So there have been surveys which talks about responsible AI approach earns twice as much profit compared to those without. And there has been a lot of other surveys which value this market at $2.76 billion. Now, I will not go by figures, but we need to understand a simple non or irresponsible behavior can lead to a huge cost, which are by these three risks. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard this news, but this talks about lot in AI governance and responsible AI. A girl was raped in metaverse and a teenager commits suicide after falling in love with a AI character, which is a chatbot or an LLM model. Now, these two are very, very scary. These two have just surfaced, but there can be multiple and many other similar incidences which questions the entire existence of responsible AI and AI governance. You know, a lot of time we say that we practice responsible AI, but generally we don't, right? So a rose by any other name should smell as a rose. So you call it AI ethics, trustworthy AI, ethical AI, AI governance, transparent AI, responsible data science, or AI governance. It's all the same. Different people call it by different name. And I just wanted to clarify when I'm talking about all of these under one umbrella. And again, RAI across the world, we have seen EU AI Act, Singapore has some act which has a fine associated with it. OECD, China, India, and Australia also are coming up with very stringent policies when it comes to responsible AI. Right? I'll not go in the nitty-gritties of each act, but this is to show that there exist some policies, but again, these are all half-baked. So now what is an RAI framework? And I believe RAI framework has three parts. Number one are principles. The main principle is social well-being and planet inclusiveness. Whatever you do in AI, you do it for people, you do it for environment, and you do it for society. So social well-being and planet inclusiveness is the first thing. Second is privacy and safety, of course. Fairness and equity, I'm not going to deep dive. There has been a lot of talks which happened on fairness and equity. Robustness and stability. Now this is very interesting. You go to, say, any LLM model, you write, who is the CEO of Core.ai, it will give you a name. You write again, it will give you another name, and then you write the name and say that, please confirm, is this the CEO of Core.ai? And you say, oh, I'm so sorry, it's not the right answer. So stability is a very, very important area of concern when it comes to LLM models, especially for researchers, especially for children who are using it to facilitate their daily working. Accountability, if something goes wrong, whose neck do you need to hold? And transparency. Still there, I applied for a small loan from Monzo. They declined, and then I told why. They told, okay, this is our system which has done. And I asked them multiple times, tell me why. They were not able to tell me, right? So transparency is not there. Similarly, how do you enable this principle? You enable this principle by APIs, codes. You have a chief RAI officer. You create education and training program, and you create adoption toolkits for something like governance toolkits, canvases, certifications, and so on and so forth. And then you have something called synthetic data to test everything which you're talking about. Right. This is a complex diagram, but this is just to show that at every stage of a data science life cycle, from business problem to deployment, there are governance and RAI principle which needs to be implemented. There is not a single area where you can't say that RAI principle can be ignored or does not have a space for responsible AI, right? Similarly, there are a couple of enablers. As I told you, you should have enablers for model and data privacy. Agnostic fairness. What I mean by agnostic fairness, be it any use case under the sun, you should be able to test for fairness. Transparency, which is for an LLM model. Now, I wrote beyond explainability. Explainability we always define through Lyman Sharp. Now, that's incomplete. You need to talk about data, model, counterfactual, risk, and so on and so forth. It has to be an end-to-end explainability in a simple language which your mom or even your grandmother can understand, not in some gibberish statistical language. Then comes drift, and then you have stability and hallucination. We talked about that, and privacy. When an LLM, for example, if you have a RAG model in a company and you ask me, tell me everything about Shrey, it can give you my phone number, right? How do you ensure that my privacy of my phone number or address or my spouse name, everything is kept in the right shape and form, right? Now, we have talked about responsible AI a lot, but responsible AI in silo does not make any sense. It has to get into some system called AI governance. So AI governance is critical to translate AI and data investment into meaningful value in responsible and risk-free manner, right? So how do you take responsible AI and put it on the table where people are able to govern it, right? So why do we need an AI governance system? So AI governance system has couple of things which it will handle. First, it will handle risk management. Any kind of risk in AI model, any kind of risk in system would be handled by AI governance. And we'll come and talk about the AI governance and how we should make it in few minutes. Ethical oversight. So we talked about responsible AI. Now these people or this body would look into that, is it being implemented end to end, continuously, or it was just on papers. Regulatory compliance. So regulations are changing every day. As we speak, regulations are changing. So this body, again, need to check that bare minimum, are we meeting regulatory compliance or not? But this is not the one thing which they need to maintain. It has to go above regulatory compliance. I always believe that regulators are on the back seat of the car. They need to come on the front seat of the car. So still, regulatory compliances are 20 years or 10 years behind the technology advancement which are happening. So just implementing regulatory compliance would not be enough, right? Transparency and accountability, and then building trust. Trust for all the stakeholder, be it internal stakeholder or external stakeholder, be it through documentation, practices, processes, and ways of working. So building trust is one of the most important thing. Now, how do you develop? So we have changed this diagram. So we use this is not clear, but this is human centricity, compliance, everything is the core. Then you design something, develop something, deploy something, and post, and then you monitor something, which is post deployment. However, between develop and deploy, there has to be a governance body which will check for everything. You will have a responsible AI canvases, you will have a maturity assessment, you will have a certification, and this certification would look like something called human oversight. We'll have sections for monitoring, we'll have section for data input, we'll have section for environment, would have section for misuse, would have section for fail-safe measures, and so on and so forth. Now, this is one of the most important things which I believe. So when you talk about a responsible AI committee, it has to be interdisciplinary. It cannot have only one kind of people. It need to have, say, data scientists, engineers, it needs to have lawyers, ethics expert, it need to have CXO, product owners, everyone. So this is how AI councils should look like, where you have you operating in between while you're talking to everybody and they are exchanging ideas. Similarly, at the stages of data science lifecycle, when you identify use case, when you create data governance policy, when you approve your model, when you deploy your model, when you monitor your model, when you version your model, when you knowledge management and responsible AI, what are the responsibility for different stakeholder? So which is RACI, responsible, accountable, consulted and informed. How do each of them play a role? Now this is not set in stone, but this is for high clarity, so that people would not say that, okay, I was not aware, this was not my job, and they will not keep passing the ball to each other, right? So this kind of framework, which you can modify as per your system, as per your organization, gives a very high clarity to any kind of organization and to any kind of body. Right. So similarly, I talked about certifications. A certification is simple, is a set of 80, 90 questions, which which assesses a project on basis of different RAI principles, something like business alignment, social well-being, fairness, stability, and tells you how do you score, and also tells you how do you score in different countries, say Australia, or say European Union, Brazil, Singapore, Canada, UK, and so on and so forth. So this is not something to be displayed outside. This is for internal consumption. So before a project goes out, AI governance body or AI COE or RAI COE, anything you call it, need to get into this and need to make sure that every project is certified before it goes for deployment. Right. Now, the most important and newest thing is called cognitive compliance. So when you fusion or when you mix advanced AI along with ethical frameworks, so what we mean by advanced AI, say LLM model or generative AI or agentic LLM model and anything which will come in next couple of years with ethical frameworks. Now here, for example, talk about hallucination, stability, robustness, privacy, toxicity, and everything. So when you merge these two and you just not follow ethical guidelines, but you follow a broader term of checklist or broader terms of guardrails, which has human values all around it, because you are doing anything which human are using it. Now that will lead to something called cognitive compliance. People also call it cognitive RAI or cognitive, practices, ethical practices. Similarly, now this is very interesting. We started with something called teenager being raped or teenager committing suicide. Now that is where we need to understand no policies exist in the earth right now which talks or have children into AI system. And take my word, children are the biggest consumer of AI system in the world. Your kids, your cousins, or everybody uses AI more than you and I are using it. So AI remains half-baked till the time you do not have children as their representative, because they are the biggest stakeholder and they are the biggest user. So you need to bring them in, you need to bring guardians in, you need to create a human in the loop system, have right kind of cognitive and emotional well-being of your youngest users. I don't know if you know or not, recently Instagram came out with Instagram for Children, where parents can put checks on Instagram for their children account, where they can talk about who will be added to their account, what kind of reels would be there, they would be looking at, and so on and so forth. So I guess that's one first step into the world when it talks about an app meant for children, and it will gradually be open up as the children grow up, right? Okay, so why is AI governance tough? Number one, there is no global regulation. So Canada has its own regulation, US has its own regulation, Europe has its own regulation, Singapore has its own, Israel has its own. Everybody's regulations are different. There's not a single unit which talks about a comprehensive AI regulation, and it's not going to happen also in next, say, 50 years or more, right? Cross-department integration. So if you work in your company, the IT does not agree with, say, engineering. Engineering does not give respect to data science. Data science don't care about the product team. The product does not care about the finance. The finance does not care about the governance. Governance do not care about the legal, and so on and so forth. So there is no cohesiveness among different multiple teams or multiple departments in the company. And that's what is the second bottleneck for creating an AI governance body. Third is evolving standards. Today you sit down, create a set of standards. By the time you put it in your company, spread it out, the regulations and standards have changed, right? So for example, I remember when we were creating standards for LLM model, the moment we published into our company, 2 days later, agentic LLM came into being. So it is so tough to keep a track of what is happening that just because of evolving standards, things are changing so fast, you will not be able to create something called a set-in-stone policy. It has to be very, very flexible. And that's the third most biggest bottleneck for any kind of AI governance, responsible AI, whatever you like to call, right? The next very important thing is red teaming. Now, what is red teaming? Red teaming is a group of people who would hack into your system, something like ethical hackers or ethical attackers, and create stress testing scenarios, create scenarios to take, break the models for fairness, privacy, explainability, hallucination, stability, and so on and so forth. And it will always try to do that till the time the system is foolproof before it goes for deployment. Now, this has been a very dominant practice in cybersecurity and other areas, but this needs to come into AI model also. Now, especially given adversarial attacks and others are happening every now and then. Okay, never have AI ever. Now, this is a very interesting thing. So when you talk about AI, you need to understand what are the things your AI model would not do. Number one, never violate user privacy. That's the first thing it will create. If you have given consent for using your data, you should also have a right to call back. You can call back or write an email that, hey, I am done with you using my data. I want you to delete all the data. And the AI system should give you that freedom, right? Never make biased or discriminatory decisions. So be it decision based on race, gender, disability, it should not discriminate people for that matter. Never act autonomously without human intervention in critical scenarios. Now, this is very interesting, but the gray area is critical scenarios. If it is predefined that these are the critical scenarios, well, good enough. If it is not defined and you are not using, people would say, oh, this was not a critical scenario and this is a critical scenario. Never engage in manipulation or misinformation. Again, so something like deep fake or creating images using generative AI and saying that these are real, so these should not be done. All the images on my slide are by an AI tool, right? LLM evaluators. So how many of you have heard about this term, LLM as a judge? So LLM as a judge is very simple. It is a different LLM model would judge an existing LLM model that how robust it is, right? And so it will check another LLM model will check the existing LLM model for stability, consistency, and explainability. Now, what is the use of this? So when you have an LLM evaluator, you don't need a human, or the time taken by human to evaluate something reduces. You can scale it. You can evaluate hundreds of LLM model at one go within a couple of minutes or hours, and then you have consistency. So for example, if I and you are sitting and evaluating an LLM model, you'll say, okay, this is 7 out of 10, okay to be deployed. I may say 3 out of 10. So there's no consistency because of a lot of differences. So this LLM model as a judge would have consistency. It will evaluate an existing system under couple of criteria which are predefined without any prejudice or any kind of bias or any kind of cultural or personal influences. Third, explainability. Sometimes when somebody asks you, why did you take this decision? A lot of time we do not have an answer, right? We are not able to articulate why did we do that. An LLM model as a judge can not only tell you why, but also can tell you why not. So these are very, very important. So an AI governance committee can help bridge the gap by, number one, auditing AI systems. So a complete audit policies, which we saw, RACI matrix and governance and everything. And evaluation, providing oversight for continual improvement. That every time something comes in, they know that these are the changes which need to be done going forward. Of course, human in the loop is something which cannot be ignored at any given point of time. And this is something which I always liked, adaptive governance. We started with something where we talked about kids and we talked about regulatory changes. Now, these are very, very recent phenomena. These are something which are happening very, very recently and which are ever changing. Today, there has been a case of teenager being abused on metaverse, a kid committing suicide and her mother fighting case with the company which has done, and there is no law which exists, and there has been no prosecution. And then every day EU AI Act has changed, I guess, 2 or 3 times. White House Charter has changed a couple of times. Singapore is coming out with new regulations every now and then. So when everything changes so much, what is one thing you need to do? You need to practice something called adaptive governance. So everything we talked about, nothing should be set in stone, nothing. Everything should be modularized. So you can pick up a module and replace the module. It has to be very, very agile, right? So that agility would give you flexibility of taking out something and changing something. That is what is the next era. 2025 will be all about adaptive governance and flexibility in AI governance. And that's where I talked about interdisciplinary people. So for example, a person like me may not understand new legal laws are coming in. So you need to have a lawyer, or say a legal expert, an ethics expert, a product person, maybe a CXOs, a technician, so an engineer, a data scientist, and many other people who come together and form this committee. The most important talk about this adaptive governance also, that these are chairs, not people. There should not be one person assigned to a role. There should be one role assigned to a role. Now that's also part of adaptive governance. So today I would act as a chief RAI officer. Tomorrow somebody else in my absence, or I'll be replaced. Then I may be brought back in. So adaptive governance is about creating something called stewards or champions in your company, where hundreds of people are trained to become RAI champions, responsible AI champions, responsible AI stewards, who are able to do this, take this decision whenever required. They are able to, create a fast moving, they are able to create an adaptive governance policies and framework in a fast moving regulatory environment. And that is very, very important. You cannot have people, you cannot have modules, you cannot have policy which are set in stone or is sacrosanct. They has to be flexible, and they need changes. You need to have the right kind of red team, you need to have right kind of policies, you need to have right kind of enablers, API, canvases, certifications, and everything to enable. And also you need to ensure that not only children, but people who are senior citizens, people who are disabled, people who have problem with mental illness and everything, are taken into consideration before you create any kind of policies. And I'll pause from here. Thank you so much. Any questions? I'm open for any queries if you have. Okay, thank you. I'll see you around.
Okay, so next we have a keynote speaker. His name is Arno Ayu. No, I forgot. Allen, okay, CEO and R&D Director at Numalis, presenting AI Trustworthiness, a path toward mass adoption in critical industries. Arno will discuss how AI is transforming critical sectors like healthcare, transportation, and defense, where safety and reliability are paramount. He will explore the role of global regulations like the EU AI Act and the importance of robustness and explainability in building trust in AI solutions. Join us to learn about advanced techniques and tools that ensure AI meets the technical, regulatory, and performance demands of high-stakes environments. Please welcome Arno to the stage.
All right, so hi everyone. Thanks for the intro. So I'm Arno Joralen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Numalis, a company working on AI reliability. But I'm also an expert in standardization in several standardization committees. And what I'm trying to do today is to give you some indication on how standards can help you adopt, even in critical industries, AI systems. Because we're not all equal under the AI adoption. In many sectors, adopting AI is rather easy. Like maybe in HR, you can use some LLMs to do stuff. But when you go to more critical applications, like in defense, like aeronautic, or like in automotive, or in healthcare, suddenly you have already existing regulation. You have existing certification, standards, you have a framework already in place that tells you how to build a system. And usually it's all about risk mitigation. Like if you're building like a plane, you're not allowed to have like 99% accuracy. We wouldn't even tolerate like 1% of planes crashing down. Like we want all the plane to fly. And so here we see that the classical methods to build systems will not really apply to AI system, because what we have right now is not always up to the challenge. And so how do we build an AI system right now? So what we do is basically we apply this kind of funnel. So it's a very simplistic way to put it, but it's what is written right now in the standards. So basically, you try to write some requirements. So what are you going to build? Then you try to bring up a lot of data. And you hope that your data is correct, it's various, it has right annotation, etc. And then you start training on some models you have chosen, or you maybe have designed it yourself. Then you go to validation, and so here you try to benchmark as much as you can in order to have like the proper safety requirements matched. And then you deploy and you monitor all of it. And it seems easy enough like that, but none of these steps is actually easy. And most of these steps are almost impossible to do in some cases. And so let's delve down, for example, on how we build safety critical applications right now. So if you come from the aeronautic sector, you're very familiar with this kind of V-cycle that is used to make safety critical applications. And so when you start with a need, then you go to a specification, some high-level requirements, and then you grind down into low-level requirements, and then you arrive at coding. And coding is just a way to answer the exact low-level requirements that you have received, and nothing more. You have to guarantee that you're doing exactly what you're being asked to do, and nothing more. And then you have the other branch where you're going to make testing more and more at the unit testing and then at the system level. When you're doing AI using the previous funnel I showed you, basically you're taking a shortcut. Basically you're saying, I have a need, I'm going to bring some data in, and then I will have my code ready. And you completely forgot all of the rest. Like, where are the specifications? Where are the high-level requirements? Where are the low-level requirements? How am I going to test it? Because I haven't wrote it. Because with AI, I have this illusion that I can just brute force my problem with more data and a bigger model. And that's the point that is stressing out a lot of the industries that are used to make safety critical applications, because they don't work like that. They don't understand that. And they don't want to work like that, basically because they deem it unsafe. And it's not entirely irrational to have this fear, because we've seen it, for example, in transportation, in the automotive. The US is far advanced and have already self-driving cars. However, many of the authorization they received are being receded because they say, well, we let you try it out on the roads. We've seen how many accidents you caused, how many problems you're causing. You're not safe enough. So they are actually starting to see that we cannot just brute force the problem. We have to find a clearer and a smarter solutions. And so when a problem arises, usually there are some lawyers that are coming in. And when lawyers are here, usually also the governments. And so right now, there are plenty of regulation that's brewing. Previous speaker was speaking about that. Obviously, there is the EU AI Act. I think most of you have already heard it already today. But it's not enough. It's not the only one. You have, for example, even in defense, NATO is building its own reference for certifying AI system. So it will be regulation for the military. And you have several countries that are doing their own small version of the AI Act in their own. And so you have UK, you have Canada, you have Singapore, you have South Korea, you have Japan, you have even the Philippines. We discovered that last month. The Philippines are building a regulation on their own, and they're going to enforce it for all AI applications. And so, as an industry practitioner, how am I going to deal with all of that? Because if every country has its own and everything is different, how am I going to export my product? If I'm in Serbia, I want my product to maybe go to China, to go to the EU, to go to the US, and I don't want to have completely widely different regulations to abide. So how am I going to do that? So usually the answer is through standardization, because the regulators, let's be honest, they're maybe in good faith. They're trying to build something that is, meaningful in order to protect their citizens. But they're not technicians. They're not AI engineers. So they don't know actually what to do in order to make an AI safe. And so in the EU, basically, what they said is that they have this new way of building regulation, which is called the new legislative framework, which is say, basically, I'm going to write requirements that are unclear, but for me, they're enough. And then I'm going to ask some standardization committee to write the standards to match these requirements, and basically shift the problem to them and say to them, well, deal with it, bring me some standards that I can use in order to abide to my own regulation. And so this is what happened for the EU AI Act. They basically said to the Senelec, hey, guys, please do us this favor and build the standards we need. But the two worlds are not exactly aligned. Obviously, the EU AI Act is using terms, very general terms, like, yeah, I want AI to be robust, secure, it needs to have some oversight, without defining any of those. And on the other side, we have standardization committee that are talking about technical stuff. So stuff like, yeah, you can have a metric like the F1 score to measure accuracy. You can measure stability. You have gradient attacks, etc. So very, very narrow technical stuff. So we need the two to communicate in order to make it work. And that's the point actually we're doing in the standardization committee. We are trying in these whole architectures of how to comply to regulation, how to build with different standards and different standardization committee frameworks that are answering that. And they are back and forth between regulation, between standards, between the industry, because we want the standards even to be applicable to the industry. Otherwise, it's not meaningful. And so we're part of this, Numalis. Basically, we wrote most of the requirements for robustness in the ISO and in the Sensenelec, and we're trying with the Commission to align with them what they're expecting to have in terms of compliance with the regulation. And so this whole play here is done currently and should be arriving at some form of deliverable in 2025. Let's be hopeful. And basically, it's a huge investment of effort. We have many, many, many standards that are coming. So right now, the most advanced standardization committee available is the ISO. It's been founded 6 years ago. It has already have like 30 published standards. We have 36 ongoing one, and we're already talking about like adding at least 20 more. So it means like in a few years you will have like probably almost 100 standards available from the ISO. Which one would be applicable for the AI Act? Well, that's at the Sensenelec level to decide, which is also building its own standards. So the previous speaker was right. Regulation is moving fast, standardization is also moving fast, and we need to be agile because you will have tons of documents to read and to integrate into your own governance in order to make it work. And since AI is an ever-evolving field, this is probably going to be a trend. This is not just a phase. Because in 2 years, if, I don't know, some new ID comes up, like generative AI 3 years ago, we'll have to deal with it. We'll have to adapt regulation, we'll have to adapt all the standards. And so you will have to adapt your own governance. And so the processes, the tools, everything will be adapted in order to cope with this new AI development. However, right now, basically the framework in order to make an AI compliance to the regulation of the EU will look like this, approximately. It's basically something that will deal with 5 major standards. Obviously, you'll have a management system, so something at the top, really for the organization to say, I am proficient in AI and have the right structure. It's not talking about product, just about your own organization. One step below, you'll have risk management. How do I evaluate the risk of my own systems? And how do I cope with that? What organizational steps did I took in order to make it work? Conformity assessment, because, hey, you need to be certified at some point. Basically, regulation will ask you at some point to be certified by somebody else. Self-certification, probably not a good thing for AI, because there is a lot of bias when you build AI, usually when you're on data. So probably a third party will be necessary. And finally, you have the low level regarding the product. And here we're really talking about AI quality, AI trustworthiness. And so here you will find the actual requirements regarding how to build the product, how to verify the product, and how to deploy the product. Otherwise, you will not be able to comply to the upper level. These can change, definitely. But for the next 2 or 3 years, we're hopeful this will be the architecture that the EU will propose, and which would be probably inspiring other countries. We have several countries, for example, Japan or Korea or Canada, that are coming to EU at each of our meetings in Sensenelec in order to see how we do it. Because the EU is the most advanced in terms of regulation right now. So everyone is like copying what the neighbor is doing. Because, hey, why not? It's free. So let's show you now how one requirement is grind down until you have like something actionable for an AI engineer. So here I've chosen robustness because, well, that's my main expertise I have. And so in the EU AI Act, it's basically one article that says the AI should be robust, accurate, and cyber secure. So it's wide open there. You have like 3 completely different things, and it's all in one article. So it doesn't tell you at all how to do any of that. So to answer that, the trustworthiness framework, so remember the one at the bottom, is trying to define 14 requirements. So from one article, we end up with 14. And in these 14 requirements, we describe a lot of stuff. We say, well, we need some definition of an operational design domain. So where are you going to use your system? We are defining what kind of events can happen in your domain of use. And at some point, we thought that, well, it's too complex. So what can we do? We don't have time to write all of it. And so what we've done, we said, well, there is some ISO document already published. We can just say, hey, use that, so that we don't have to work anymore. And so we gain time. And so basically, the last requirement is telling you, well, please do use ISO 2429 so that you can implement robustness. All right, so I'm an engineer, follow up the trail. Okay, so from ISO 2429, so I'm going now into ISO world. And so in this document, now I found metrics, I found concepts that are actually actionable. I can implement them. There are formulas, there are, notion of thresholds, stuff that an engineer can write it down in terms of specification and then verify it. And remember the V cycle, all the V, the left part of the V where I don't have specification, high-level requirements, low-level requirements. Now I kind of have. Now I can express something that is finally grinding down until we have specific requirements to verify. But one major catch here is always the notion of domain. Where are you going to use your AI? And here we touch something that is quite hard to explain because AI is basically a tool that is very good at catching the behavior of a system on an unknown domain. If you were to know exactly what domain you're going to use and how it operates, you wouldn't use AI. You will do classical software because, hey, you know exactly how it does, so you can formally describe it. You use AI on stuff you don't understand, on stuff that is too complex to model. And so when I say, yeah, you have to have a given domain, well, I'm putting you in a conundrum. How are you going to have a defined domain in an application where you don't know the domain? And so here we're starting to have like a new approach needed. So what we propose in 2429 is, for example, to describe the domain as a set of attributes that can vary. Like if I had this domain of, I want to detect tanks. Here is a tank, but in my domain, there is a lot of that can happen. So it can be, foggy. It can be, my lens is dirty, or it can be perturbated by the lightning. And so all of which is changing the notion of the domain I have described before. And so what I need is a way to model all of that in order to verify over the domain that everything is fine. And if my system is telling me, this is a tank, it should also tell me that these 3 are tanks. And so I want to verify that. But I cannot just, randomly pick every variation. There are so many, like almost an infinite number. So I need to find a way to model all of that and verify it at once. Otherwise, it's too long. And so this is what we describe, and this is what our company does, actually. So we allow to model, the perturbation space. What can vary in my domain once I express it? And then through tools, we can analyze how this domain evolves inside the neural network, for example, if you're using neural networks. And you want to verify at the end, is everything a tank within it? Or maybe there are something else? And if everything is a tank, then good news. I have just proven stability, which is part of what a robust AI can do. And so these kind of processes, this is new ways to validate robustness, which are now prescribed through the standardization to answer the regulation. Another aspect we can explore using this kind of methodology is explainability. So previous speaker also touched a little bit on this topic, but usually AI systems are kind of hard to interpret. It's basically usually seen as black boxes, where you cannot really look inside and understand what it is. We challenge that. We say, no, you can look in it. The only problem is that it's a big mathematical formula that for a human mind, you don't understand. But for a machine can understand that. Machines are dealing with large formula all the time, better than us. So we can use machine and tools in order to open the black box and interpret why the system is telling me that, yeah, these are planes, and I know, and now I want to know exactly for what reasons these are planes. All of which I can use then in my verification scheme, because if I'm telling you, yeah, this is a plane because there is cloud, well, that's not a good reason for being a plane. A plane is not made of clouds. But in most of my images of plane, I probably have clouds. So maybe there is bias there. So I want to verify the absence of bias using tools in order to verify that my system is recognizing planes for the right reasons. And that's also corresponding to some requirements I could have written before and verified afterwards. So you can see, basically, we have already existing methods in order to evaluate the performance of an AI system. Usually it's statistical methods. They are basically measuring accuracy, recall, F1 score, this kind of stuff. And for data scientists here, I think I'm speaking plainly for you. But for the others that don't know exactly what it is basically you pick and choose some data points within the input space, you verify how much your system works on that, and you made a metric. With formal methods, the one I've shown you before, you can explore around it, and you can verify how the behavior is working on more than just data points. You can do it on the whole subspace now. And so by combining the two, you can explore the input space and verify across it. And so this is what the standards are now prescribing you to do in order to verify robustness. And this is something we actually done in a project, for example, with the EASA. So it is the European Agency for Avionics Safety. And basically they ask us, well, we have written some requirements on our own, like the AI Act, and we would like to verify how much they are applicable in real life. And for that, they tasked us to do real-life verification on systems. So we had these three systems. So one was air traffic speech-to-text, so basically a pilot talking to the control tower, and with all the noises, the accents the pilots can have. Another is an algorithm for collision avoidance. So two planes closing in. What are you going to do using an algorithm to avoid them to crash together? And the final one was visual inspection. So basically, you imagine a drone, hovering around a plane and telling you, well, there is a dent here, there is a lightning strike here, so you have maintenance, plan for the plane, set it up automatically. And so for these three, we use the methodology I described you before, so robustness, explainability, statistical approach, formal approach. We've done all of it in order to see whether or not it was feasible in order to verify the robustness of these applications. And if you're interested, you can type the MLIP project on Google, and all the results are available. It was funded by the EU, so the EU is quite nice with that everything is free for everyone. And so what we did, we had as a conclusion of this project is that there is no one step of validation fits every AI system plan here. Basically, it's an iterative process. There is no way to start from a requirements and end up with a perfect AI in one straight line. So the V-cycle doesn't really work. We can mimic something that look like that, but we have to integrate a lot of feedback loop. We need to integrate the fact that AI are not designed perfectly right away. They are designed through trials and error, basically. But you can orient the way these trials and error are done by using requirements, by using methodology, by using tools. You just have to implement that into your organization. You're not just doing like randomly exploring to find an AI system that works. And so these processes, we also help companies implement them within their organization in order to have like safe release of the AI system into the market. But all of that brings us to a fundamental change in the mindset we need to have. Like, we cannot build AI system without having new processes, new skills, and new tools. Basically, in order to have conformity, you need to change the way you build your system. We've seen it before. The classical way doesn't apply for AI system. It has to be iterative, and it has to do with monitoring in operation, because your domain, since you don't really know what it is at the beginning, probably change at the end. And so you have to monitor all of that in order to include it into your scheme of deployment and validation. And all of it is requiring to have human skills to be developed. There are, I think, new work that will appear in the next years, because right now we are just relying on something called data scientists, and I think we need to grind it down into more specific niche skills area so that we can have like highly competitive and highly skilled workforce in order to challenge all of these, to tackle all of this challenge we have. And finally, we need to have new tools. Basically, the current tools to design AI software are not enough. They are good for training, and nothing for the rest. So we need to have like a more CI/CD, so continuous integration, continuous development approach, in order to have like full control over the life cycle of an AI system, of what it does. And we can rely on that on formal methods in order to verify not just on data points, but also subspace. And there is also a whole deal with hardware, but I'll not delve into that, maybe if you want any questions. And so what we do at Numalis is basically we deploy formal method at scale. So basically we can take an AI system, take a description of the input space you want to validate, and we measure how much the system is robust, how much we can explain what it does. And we do that with a tool called Sample. You can try that for free if you want. There is a freemium version if you want on our website. And all of which is responding to the regulation of the EU AI Act, but probably the others that are brewing, because like I said, everyone is trying to copy on the EU AI Act on how to do it. And everything we do answer the standards I was talking before, in order to assess if your system is robust or not. We still have time for a few questions if you have, and thanks for everyone for coming. And if you have questions, please, I say now. Thanks.
Hi, thanks a lot for your talk. I'm very interested on the responsible AI and explainable AI bit. I'm coming from finance, and my question is, like, you showed in the last slide, like, EU AI Act check, right? But there we have this risk-based approach, what is introduced, and the interpretation of what it means to be compliant is like open, let's say. It is open for non-critical stuff at least. And it's also still open who is going to check your compliance, because you can do the conformity assessment, but it's not clear like who will be the entity to control you in the end. For us, like in banking, we have ECB, national authorities. What is your perspective on this? Who do you think will be will there be an entity that will control our compliance with AI standards?
So, what I can tell you is that, well, there is the AI office, but I don't think they will do that. But they will try to monitor and try to organize the market for that, I think. What would happen is that if you're in a domain where you already have certification and competent authorities and competent auditors, they will probably inherit for your specific domain the competency to do that. If you don't have that, for example, in HR, you don't have competent authority and certification right now, but you will need some under the AI Act, probably it will end up in the hand of your government to nominate someone. So, for example, in France, the CNIL, so it's the one dealing with all the GDPR stuff, are probably going to inherit this responsibility, whereas for the aeronautic or for the automotive, they are already existing ones, so they're going to delegate to them. So I guess for your kind of business or banking, you will have the same people that you already have now, but with new competencies in order to audit your system.
Thank you.
I think we're out of time.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Arno.
All right, thank you, everyone.
There will now be a 30-minute coffee break, and after that, you can see the two keynote speakers at Ivo Andrić B Hall, and at 2:30 the talks will resume here. Thank you.